GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
An unrepentant Vladimir Putin gives a State of the Nation address today in Moscow. We'll be asking, is there any end to this war in sight? A big week for Keir Starmer. He's actually announcing policy. Is Labour getting onto the right track? And we'll have a quick thought about other Tories about to tear themselves to pieces over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And joining me on Talking Pints, a world record-holding former first-class cricketer, Pat Pocock, and we'll talk about the incredible revival of English cricket. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. US President Joe Biden says the United States will announce new sanctions against Russia this week. Biden has been speaking to thousands who gathered in the centre of Warsaw, telling the crowds that the Ukrainian people's love of their country will prevail in the war against Russia. It follows talks he held this afternoon with the president of Poland, a day after his surprise visit to Ukraine. Well, the two leaders today addressed security issues and growing NATO's presence in Poland.
The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war is never a necessity. It's a tragedy.
Well, earlier on, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said Russia's decision to suspend its participation in a nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has now summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account.
Well, in news here at home, a former Conservative MP jailed for sexually assaulting a teenager has been freed from prison after serving half his term. Imran Ahmed Khan was jailed for 18 months last May for groping a 15-year-old boy after a party in 2008. The 49-year-old lost a Court of Appeal challenge against his conviction and sentence in December. Supermarkets are going to be rationing a growing list of fruits and vegetables. Asda is allowing customers a maximum of just 3 items from a list of 8, which includes tomatoes, broccoli and raspberries. Morrison's will be following suit with restrictions in place from Wednesday. Bad weather across Europe and Africa is being blamed for the disruption in supply chains, with retailers warning the situation could last for weeks. And lastly, the Princess of Wales has visited a care home for elderly people in Berkshire today. And as it's Pancake Day, Kate picked up some batter, a spatula and a frying pan to flip some culinary treats. However, even the Princess had to admit she didn't have much flair for it. She even said her children may boycott her pancakes after seeing her attempt, which she called a congealed blob. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now it's time for Farage.
Well, whether or not the Conservative Party is about to go back into a period of internecine warfare, all will be revealed over the course of the next few days. But we tend to obsess a bit about the Conservative Party in the media, although, of course, they rather obsess about themselves. Maybe we don't pay enough attention to Sir Keir Starmer and what he's doing in the Labour Party. Now, I want to give him 10 out of 10 for booting out Jeremy Corbyn. That, I think, is a very, very smart move. Corbyn contributed more to that 80-seat majority for Johnson than anyone's ever given him credit for. I think a lot of people in the Midlands and the North just couldn't stand it, didn't feel that he was patriotic, felt that he'd been too close to the IRA and, frankly, didn't support the British Army. So Starmer's been in a good place, but he's never actually given us any policies. Well, this week he's going to. And today, there he was at the National Farmers Union. Yes, of all places, Labour and the rural economy. Interesting. Here's a quick clip of what Starmer had to say earlier on today.
Nearly 60% of the food we consume. Renewable energy for 10 million homes. Custodians of 70% of our land. And, of course, 4 million jobs. And then there's net zero. A monumental challenge for this industry. But one that you've run towards. Net zero by 2040 across England and Wales is tough. But it's right.
That was Keir Starmer at the National Farmers Union. I'm joined by Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror. Kevin, farming, the rural community, rural crime, not traditionally things that Labour would be associated with being very strong on.
No, but if you go back to 1979, 2 in 5 of the seats Labour won in that Tony Blair landslide were rural or semi-rural seats. And what he's doing now, he's kind of going back to that playbook, and he thinks, like, it's like his tanks on the Tory lawn. He's putting these tractors on the Tory fields.
Yes, I guess Worcester Woman was kind of market town, small city.
And he's broadening out the appeal. And he said to farmers today, where, by common consent, he went down better than Mark Spencer, the government, the Conservative Environment Secretary, because he said, look, too often in the past, farming, rural communities have been an afterthought. So he admitted Labour hadn't always got it right. And then he came up with a few policies that they were like, such as half the food bought by public bodies will be grown in Britain, which is a big market, billion plus.
Well, actually what he said was more specific than that, to be fair. He said 50% of the food that would be procured by public bodies would be local and sustainable.
Yeah.
There's one slight problem there, Kevin Maguire. That kind of food's very expensive.
Yes, well, I think that's... the truth is...
great, but go and buy organic for your weekly shop, and it's a lot of money.
And as you know, Nigel, Brexit's also made some food imports more expensive.
Well, it should have made them cheaper, but that's a separate row. It should have made them cheaper.
We'll have that row another time.
Because we could have bought stuff from all over the world. I mean, he said that the government had given up on farmers. I do think, I mean, fishing is a separate issue entirely, but I do think there is a feeling since Brexit this government doesn't quite know exactly what it wants to do.
And he's picking away at that. You mentioned fishing, right? You know the state. I mean, you go angling, you know the state of rivers and the sewage discharges, what's happening to chalk streams and so on.
Yeah.
So Labour say, right, you need bigger penalties to clean up that water. He goes to farming.
Good. I get it with the environment and with the fishing industry. You know, the Tories have not delivered. But it's these specifics. Rural crime. it doesn't get talked about a lot. You know, we hear about knife crime in London.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a substantial amount of very, very serious aggravated burglary, etc. going on. And Starmer there promising an extra 13,000 police.
Yeah, I think
for rural Britain. But again, it gets said, but it's totally uncosted.
Yeah, well, Yvette Cooper came up with a way of costing it, which I've no doubt will be picked apart. But nevertheless, it's that intention to tackle the problem. And when you've been in power for 13 years, as the Conservatives have, if there's a problem, why haven't you solved it earlier? Or did you actually create it? And people will look at Labour and they will look at Starmer if they think he's somebody who is grappling with their problems and he's coming up with some of the answers.
Well,
Doesn't mean he's got to get a blank cheque.
It may work, but he also said today, quite specifically, to the farming community and the food import and export business, a closer relationship with the European.
I thought you'd have picked up our friends in the European Union, he said. That's the bit I thought you'd have picked.
Well, they can be friends on a good day. But here's the point. I mean, here's the point about that. Is he talking about going back to some type of common agricultural policy? What does he actually mean?
No, I think what he means is, for instance, if you export to the European Union, in many cases you need vet certifying whatever you're exporting, certainly meat, and he wants to end that very expensive bureaucracy. So it's not just Northern Ireland where there is a problem, which Rishi Sunak was attempting to resolve, but I think he's going to be too weak and he's going to be defeated by the DUP and the
that's
ERG.
Going to be, I mean, that's going to be very interesting, certainly. But
if you're Starmer and you have a different approach and you haven't got a record of hostility to the European Union members, you have a better chance of getting a deal going forward.
If you agree...
To some extent,
to go along with all of their rules.
To some extent, yes. That you will have.
So you surrender the ability.
You'll have to mirror their rules. Now, I believe you disagreed. I believe the best deal was when we were in. We're not in now. You've got to try and make the best of it.
But if we mirror, if this is the precursor to what's coming on Thursday. And on Thursday, there is a major speech coming from Starmer. The 5 key policy areas, sort of, in a sense, you know, going down the same route that Sunak went down. I mean, are we going to see, and I've no doubt this phrase about our relationship with Europe will crop up again on Thursday. Are we going to see specific policy on Thursday, or doesn't he need to do that at this stage? Can he avoid specifics at this stage?
I think he can when the government is doing so badly and the Conservatives are tearing themselves apart. And he's going to come out with these 5 national mission statements on the economy, health, education, crime and the environment. You can get some old policies he's announced, he can dress them down again, he can talk about them, but he's addressing those areas of people's concerns. All areas where he can show the government has failed. Now, at some point, he will have to prove how Labour would succeed. But I think at this point, you know, this stage in the argument, you don't have to necessarily come up with all your best policies. Because if you fire the shots now, what are you going to do for the next 18 months?
Oh, I'll tell you what would happen if he did it now. The Tories would just copy every single one of them.
If they're capable of doing that, actually, Nigel. But if we go back to Brexit, though, you should be happier as a Leaver than me as a Remainer, because Starmer has said if Labour not be in the single market, not be... bringing back free movement, won't return to the customs union. 3 things I always think will benefit the British economy.
When I hear that, I'm pleased. But when I see meetings at Ditchley between the upper echelons of New Labour and elements of the Conservatives, I'm concerned. Final thought, Kevin. You know, we know the Conservatives are doing very badly indeed. There's been no Rishi bounce of any kind at all. Boris is sharpening his knives. You can see it a blooming mile off. The Northern Ireland protocol, I doubt they'll be as brave as, you know, for cabinet resignations. I doubt that. But there'll still be a big rebellion. There'll still be a big, big rebellion. The Tories are doing badly. Is Starmer doing well?
I think he's beginning to. I think he's been lucky, particularly over Johnson destroying himself with parties. Then you had the Truss nightmare. Sunak comes in, can't get a grip. All that's played to his advantage, as is what's happening in Scotland, where Nicola Sturgeon going and the SNP tearing itself apart now. Will gain Labour.
I mean, that was like Starmer's birthday.
I think he's beginning to find his feet, and he's going to the centre ground. That's where he's going. He sees where the voters are.
I've given him marks. I've given him full marks for getting rid of Corbyn. Let's see what comes on Thursday. It'll be aspirational, not much detail.
I think you're right. It'll be painting a vision in primary colours, but if you look for the detail, I think you need a
vision in primary colours. Thank you, Kevin Maguire. Well, as we say, it's going to be a big day. I think Thursday is a very important day. I kind of get the point that Kevin Maguire just made, that maybe he is just beginning to do a bit better. Charisma, personality, there isn't much, but maybe that's what people want these days. I don't know. Let's get an alternative view, more from the centre-right of the political spectrum in terms of newspapers, from David Maddox, who is the political editor of The Express Online. Kevin Maguire's point was very interesting, that in '97, Labour won a lot of seats in England that had rural hinterlands. Is that what today was all about?
Yes, this is the assault on the blue wall. I completely agreed with what Kevin was saying. And actually, if you look at the polling, he must feel emboldened by that, because he can run through the algorithms like the rest of us, and he can see that seats they would never have dreamed of, a bit like the Tories did in 2019 in the red wall, the Labour safe seats. They could suddenly see these seats suddenly being more than possible, easily winnable, and I think Starmer can see that. And it was interesting today. I thought it was a very important day, actually.
Yeah, and he was giving detail today. You know, I ran through it with Kevin. You know, the 13,000 more rural police officers, the 50% of local foods would be procured by public bodies. This was quite specific detail, wasn't it?
Yeah, and most of all, it was quite patriotic. This is old patriotic Labour. This was, you know, British food first, if you like. And, you know, that was something that's been missing from Labour now since, I think Tony Blair had a bit of it, certainly in the first half of his premiership. But it's been missing from that, the Labour narrative, really, certainly since 2010. And he seems to have picked it up again, which is amazing when you consider that this was a man leading the attempt to undo Brexit just a few years ago.
Yes, and standing beside Corbyn in the 2019 election, but that is kind of history in a sense, isn't it? Because I think most voters are looking to what's going to come next as opposed to what has happened before. Thursday, this is the really big moment, isn't it? This is when he sets out his vision in these 5 key areas. And I guess once he's laid out that vision, he pretty much has to stick with that. Between now and the next election.
He does. And there's no going back on that. And he probably wouldn't be wise to add more detail, really.
At this stage?
Certainly at this stage. Not until the kind of last few weeks of the election. But this is a big moment. And let's hope, quite frankly, it's more impressive than the 5 points made by Rishi Sunak earlier this year.
And this being said, by the way, by a Conservative supporting newspaper.
Absolutely, yeah.
You thought that was pretty dismal, yeah?
I thought it was dismal. Most of them were things which would happen anyway, or should happen anyway. It would have taken an absolute disaster, for example, for inflation not to come down. It was still a question mark about whether he'll really get growth going. The NHS waiting lists should come down because they were spiking because of the lockdown and things like that. I suppose
stop the boats.
Stop the boats. So, well, you see, that's where I'm most sceptical, and I can tell you, I've just had conversations just before I came across it with Conservative MPs who are livid, absolutely livid, about the fact that again this week they postponed the legislation to have these illegal migrants immediately deported.
Yeah, and protests growing all over the country. Protests now. I mean, school kids. Protesting outside a police station in Kent yesterday. David, final thought. You've been stalking the corridors today and the tea rooms of the Palace of Westminster. There's a big event tonight, isn't there, with the European Research Group of Conservatives and the Democratic Unionists. Where are we going with this?
Well, just before I came over, I was told that 2 very junior members of the government are on the point of resigning. Because they think that the deal that the Prime Minister wants is a sellout, and they see no career path for them, given the polling. So they think they may as well go out on a point of principle and make a noise about it. I think that actually may. I'm less sceptical than you. I think that may trigger resignations further up the food chain, especially those who may be interested in taking over from Mr. Sunak, because it's certainly not. His position is not safe.
The public are sick to death with these university student union games?
They're in a death spiral. This is over. It's over for them. They may not have a leader, Labour leader, with the charisma of Tony Blair, but these guys are finished. They've ripped each other apart. The public are fed up. You know, our polling, which is the most generous, the Techni UK one, has, for the 5 of the last 6 weeks, had them 21 points behind. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere. People want to change.
There we are. David Maddox says, it's over. They're done. It's finished. Well, I have to say, they brought it upon themselves. In a moment, we'll evaluate Vladimir Putin's big State of the Union speech today. And we'll ask the question, is this war going to end any time soon?
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So the big day today in Moscow. Yes, Vladimir Putin giving his State of the Union speech. Now, this is awkward for me. The cause of this war is awkward for me, and I can't hide away from what I said in the past. Here's a quick clip of me in 2014. Today we are rushing through an association agreement at undue speed with the Ukraine, and as we speak, there are NATO soldiers engaged in military exercises in the Ukraine. Have we taken leave of our senses? Do we actually want to have a war with Putin? Because if we do, we're certainly going about it the right way. Now look, I said that. I believe we made some terrible mistakes in the past. None of that means I support what happened on the 24th of February last year. But it's a message that Putin kept pushing today. This is him basically saying today in Moscow, it's not us, we didn't do it, the other side did.
started the war. We did everything to stop it, but Sevastopol was next. I want to say it again. It was them who have unleashed the war, and we used and are using the force to stop it.
Now, he then said that the West is in terminal, decadent decline. Here's what he had to say about the Anglican Church and its consideration of a gender-neutral God.
As it became known, the Anglican Church, for example, plans at this point, to consider the idea of a gender-neutral God. What can I say? May God forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Well, that was him mocking the West, maybe with some reason, I don't know. And finally, perhaps the slightly worrying part, where he talks about suspension of the Russian commitment to the START treaty.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account?
Well, that was Putin today. I'm joined by Lieutenant General David Leakey, former Black Rod. David, interesting with that speech. Nothing especially new, although, you know, talking about suspending, perhaps withdrawing from a nuclear proliferation treaty, is that escalation?
The absolutely key thing about this escalation debate that's going on, the very important point, is that nobody should jerk the escalation. It must be a smooth one. And if it's a smooth one, it gives a chance for a graduated escalation, little step by little step. If anyone jerks it, then there could be a petulant response, particularly by Putin.
Okay.
And so I think all this rhetoric, Putin's speech yesterday, last night, Biden's speech today, a little bit talk about withdrawing from the START today. These are all gradual, diplomatic, saber-rattling steps. I don't see any great risk or danger in that. That's just part of the orchestra, part of the choreography of what's going on here.
So when two former prime ministers stand up in the House of Commons last night and suggest sending the entirety of the RAF to Ukraine to be at President Zelensky's disposal, is that not escalation?
Well, you've got to be very careful what you do, not what you say. And I think, and I was actually most interested about what, in one of the clips you were saying, showed there was some very well-dressed, smartly dressed Russian officers, male and female. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the key things in all of this is Putin knows the reality. He is preaching propaganda, a confection of propaganda that we've just heard, to his people. And nobody dares say anything or promote anything against that propaganda, and particularly if you're in uniform. And we've seen what's happened. I'm very glad I'm not a senior officer in the Russian army at the moment, because if I said what I would want to say, what I would say if I was a senior serving British officer in the Ministry of Defence or in the chain of command anywhere, I would be, our generals do tell it as it is, the reality. But if you do that in Russia, then you end up jumping out of a 16-floor window. Yeah. And this is the difference between part of the difference between the values of what goes on in Russia and what goes on here. What Putin has been saying about escalation, he's going to use nuclear weapons, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, is much more belligerent than a couple of former prime ministers making a threat about sending a few jets. I mean, it's of a different order.
I fully understand that. I wasn't trying to draw equivalents, but both sides are ratcheting up the debate. What was interesting, and you're quite right, no one dares criticise, there wasn't really much warm applause going on from those clips that we saw earlier. The one thing Putin did not do at all, was to acknowledge that a year ago, when the tanks rolled towards Kyiv, and when he must have thought that a very quick victory was on the cards, there was no acknowledgement that I could see today that it hasn't gone very well, is it?
No, he's not going to. It's not in the propaganda playbook to advertise the failures and lack of successes. And so he's never, ever going to do that. He's not going to allow... In fact, it's quite the reverse. He's painting such an unrealistic picture of what's going on in the Donbass region, in particular in Ukraine, that when the Russians do finally discover the truth, as they will, then there is going to be a convulsive upset inside Russia. And I think one of the things that's interesting, and people are talking about it, is how will this play out? When will it end? I mean, it's the $64,000 question everybody wants answered.
Well, could there be a peace negotiation? Is that possible? Otherwise, it seems to me this could go on for years.
No, well, of course there could be a peace. So there won't be, in my view, I don't think there will be a decisive outcome on the battlefield, because neither side has the decisive strength to impose their will over the others on the battlefield. The Russians don't, and the Ukrainians don't yet. I don't think that will happen, and I don't think we'll see that happen even during the course of this year, and possibly not even during the course of next year. So to go back to your point, the only way that this is going to end, there are only two ways this is going to end, is through a diplomatic negotiation which might lead to a ceasefire, might lead to a peace. That is the only possibility of a cessation or an end to this year or next year. There is one other solution, and that is if the Russians discover the truth, and then there could be a convulsion.
You mean on casualty figures?
On casualty figures, and I think casualty figures would be a huge thing if the Russians knew exactly what was going on. And it does sort of surprise me that that we in the West, for all our control of cyber, mastery of cyber and so on, haven't been able to get the real message over to the Russians. Of course, there is a real message circulating amongst Russians, but so great is the repression and fear in Russian society that nobody dares say it, even if a lot of people even do know it. But I think there may come a point if the setbacks become so great that the Russian elite decide that enough is enough.
Well, in 1917, of course, it was losses in the First World War and surrender to Germany that led, of course, to the revolution.
Yes, and I think that's one of the things we should fear, actually, is that a sudden jerking end to this could be bad in a number of ways. As I said, if there's a jerky escalation, then somebody could get petulant. Putin could be petulant and irrational. And the other thing that could happen is if there's a convulsive end within Russia, as we've seen throughout the last 100 years or more of Russian history. If there is an internal convulsion, it goes badly for quite a few years. And I think an internal convulsion in Russia at the moment would be worse than a smooth transition to an alternative regime.
David Leakey, a lot to think about there. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and joining us this evening. Well, it's quite a sombre, thoughtful moment, isn't it? I'm afraid this is the biggest land war that's happened in Europe since 1945, and there's no end to it in sight. Back with you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel. Is there any end to this Ukraine war in sight? Well, some of your thoughts coming in. Stuart says, nope, the taxpayers will continue to be made to cough up to their own detriment. Well, certainly American taxpayers, if you believe the polls in America, a majority of Americans say they've now given enough to Ukraine. Nick says, no, it's time they faced reality. Ukraine isn't going to win this war, and we're going to need to trade with Russia after the war. The Tories are sabotaging future trade because they know they're done as a political party. Well, I don't think the Tories, even on one of their worst days, would do that deliberately. Stuart says, not for a while. And Anonymous says, if we keep arming them, then, yeah, it's a very, very good point, this. You know, do we actually, have the resources? And I really don't think, viewer, that if we just give them loads and loads of military kit, that somehow it's all going to be at an end. It's not. As the Lieutenant General said a few moments ago, in terms of what is happening on the battlefield, no one is going to win this. It will go on as a military conflict for years. There needs to be a peace negotiation at some point. Now, a couple of quick thoughts for you. After Black Lives Matter, I mean, they're real what the Farage moments with statues. Churchill's statue being graffitied. Colston, a slave trader, yes, absolutely, and then a great philanthropist in Bristol, his statue torn down and chucked in the dock. But a report out today suggesting that the Metropolitan Police have listed Churchill's statue, the cenotaph, that of Robert Peel, and many others, as controversial. Therefore, they may be open to attack. If the police start to cause some of the great symbols of our nation controversial, we are giving in to the other side. We should not do it. Archbishop Welby, one of my least favourite people in this country. There are now 12 Anglican bishops from around the world who no longer recognise him as their leader because he's about to back same-sex blessings for marriages in churches, all of which raises a fascinating issue in Scotland. Kate Forbes is running to be SNP leader. It looks like there are a couple of them out there ahead in the race, but she is a devout Christian, makes it clear she would have voted against gay marriage 10 years ago when it came up. And it begs the question, can you be somebody of strong religious faith, strong religious principles, and in a modern, progressive Britain succeed in politics? I think the answer is no, but that'll be left to the SNP voters. In a moment, a cricketer, Pat Pocock, he holds a world record for bowling. I'll talk to him about his long career in the game, his Test career, and the current amazing success of the English side.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, after the devastating discovery of Nicola Bulley's body, bringing a tragic end to one of the most widely criticised investigations in recent times. Has the controversial handling of the case made you lose faith in the police? Plus, as reports claim Meghan is upset over her South Park roasting, Samantha Markle hits back in an exclusive interview. And it'll be another night of unfiltered opinion from Nigel Farage, Tom Bauer and Baroness Kate Hoey. Join Dan 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. only on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We do love a bit of success in this country, and currently the England cricket team, wow, they won 6 of their last consecutive Test matches. We're doing well internationally with the one-day game. We've got a big, exciting series coming up against Australia this summer. To discuss that and a life in cricket and much more, I'm joined by Pat Pocock. Pat, welcome to Talking Pints.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you. Now, a long career. There you were in county cricket for over
5 years.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and yet in those days, it wasn't very well paid, was it?
Not at all. It just rose slightly as my career went on, but no, it's peanuts compared to what it is now, yeah.
So cricketers would play their cricket in the summer and then have to get jobs in the winter?
Yes, very much so.
What did you do?
Well, there was a good side of that as well, because If you reach the age of 33 or 34 and you have to pack up, it's best to have a little bit of knowledge in one trade or another and find out how offices run and how marketing budgets work, because there are so many of them now who only play cricket, and they get to 34 or 35 and they have to pack up, and I hope they've made a lot of money in that, because trying to get themselves a job when they've got nil experience in any of the avenues required to play is pretty tough, and some of them get quite depressed.
And even Test cricket, and you played Test cricket. Even Test cricket wasn't really big money. I guess Kerry Packer changed all that.
No. My 3.5-month tour at the West Indies, my first one when I was 20, I got the princely sum of £700.
Did you? Yeah. We have had a bit of inflation since, but even so, it wasn't big money. Now, Pat, your Test career, they kept picking you, playing you for a bit, and then they put somebody else in. It must have been frustrating for you. I mean, obviously delighted to play for England and very honoured, I'm sure, as everybody is, but frustrating. What happened with your career? Did it just not quite gel at Test level? Or?
I went 8 years in the middle of my peak when I wasn't picked. My first tour I picked when I was age 20 on Cargill's tour to the West Indies, and my last one was David Gower's in 84-5 to India, and both of them were fantastic tours for different reasons. Phil Edmonds and I used to bowl all day, every day throughout the whole tour, and David Gower said that he was able to keep control because we did a good job.
Yeah, and in the end, Pat, but people are going to remember you for a long time, not because you played Test cricket, not because you did quarter of a century with Surrey, important and honourable though those things are, but because you have this incredible sporting record. Talk us through it. Why are you a world record holder? To those that don't know much about the game, and for those that do, remind them.
Anybody who has a record like I had of 7 wickets in 11 balls, I mean, that was... you need so much luck, and so much just happens to be by chance. Now, the best I ever bowled in my career was against the West Indies, against a very, very powerful side with little short boundaries and a fabulous wicket to bat on. And I bowled 51 overs, 0 for 150. Now, I've never, and everybody, when I came off, they came up and in the side and they shook my hands and said, well, blah, blah, blah. And yet you try to say to somebody after 25 years that the best you ever bowled, you got 0 for 150. But no, everything just happened to get, every time they hit the ball up in the air, somebody caught it, and every time they missed it, it hit them on the pads and they were straight, or it bowled them out. But everything just happened to go right, that's really...
7 wickets in first-class cricket in 11 balls. It may never be beaten.
It may not. We're playing at Eastbourne against Sussex.
Yep.
And it looked like we lost the match, and then suddenly, bang, 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 the wickets kept falling. And in the end, they blocked it out for a draw. But that was good, yeah.
That was good. It was absolutely blooming amazing.
It was great to get a draw then.
And that's a story you can tell for the rest of your life.
But you need luck. You do need luck. Luck is... I worked in golf full-time for 24 years when I packed up playing. And if somebody gets a hole-in-one, skill takes it to 5 feet and luck takes it into the hole. And you have never seen anyone score 100 without them playing and missing, say, 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Well, just one of those times, instead of playing and missing, they nick it and they're out.
Yeah.
So you need skill to score 100, but you need luck as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do need luck.
And self-confidence. I mean, in all sport, because you go through a period when you've lost your form and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing, isn't it? I'm a very keen follower of cricket, and, over the moon. I was at Lord's when we won the 50-over World Cup final. What an incredible day that was. But the Test team, Joe Root, fabulous batsman, one of the best batsmen we've ever had.
Yes.
And yet, as leader, I think I'm right in saying we'd won one of the previous 17 games.
Yeah.
And then in comes this swashbuckler, a bit like a guy you played with called Botham.
Yeah.
What was it like being in the team with Ian?
It was a very lively experience. You could never. I remember when we were going in for a meeting, he said to me, "Look, Pat," he said, "don't talk about cricket for too long." He said, "Otherwise, we'll never get down the pub."
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain.
Yeah, no, that's not strange, is it?
No, I'm sure that's right. But Stokes is not dissimilar, is he? This big, strong, a level of self-belief that
very gifted.
Brilliant. I mean, batsman, he can bowl, he's taken a few wickets bowling too, everything. But suddenly, he's come in as England captain with this coach, McCullum, with him. And we've now won 9 games out of the last 10, and we're winning them. I've never seen Test cricket like it, have you?
It's amazing, and it's come at a very good time when Test cricket needs a really good boost of fast scoring, because people have got used to the shorter form of cricket, the white ball cricket, and it's very good. Yeah.
How good is this England team? Is it too early to tell?
They're performing really well. They haven't really been up against it much, which might be the reason, because they're performing so well. But they haven't been tested when they're really up against it. I mean, every now and again, obviously, they have a session where things don't go their way. But at the moment, they haven't been tested that much. But no, we've got a very good side. We've got loads of individual good players, and
I'd love to see cricket back on terrestrial television.
Oh, very much so.
You know, we have a much bigger audience. Because what strikes me, Pat, is this is amazing. We've got this incredible team. You know, we're brilliant at Test cricket now. We've got Australia coming up. I feel really good about the Ashes this time round. I really do. We're good at 2020 nationally. We're good at, World Champions, 50, all of it. And yet, if you look at the proportion of England cricketers, both men and women, who were privately educated.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that, but given that 7% of the population go to private schools, at least 50% of our teams in recent years have been to private schools. So we're not getting cricket in enough state schools, are we?
We've only got cricket, I believe, in 15% of the state schools. Now, all the county sides, they want to sign the best players they can. But if only 15% go to the state schools, and the chances are the better players are going to come from the public schools. So there's no other reason than skill and skill and skill. They just want to pick the best players they can.
Yeah, and so that reinforces itself.
And so if we want to have more people from the state schools playing, we've got to get more state schools playing cricket. It's as simple as that, really.
Well, I hope we do, because actually globally, cricket is becoming massive. I mean, you look at India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. I mean, hey, you've got between 1.5 and 2 billion people living in those countries. The IPL, I mean, it's almost like Premier League football.
Yes, and it's also good that Pakistan has come back into it again, and the reception that everybody got, not only the players but all the journalists as well, was absolutely amazing in Pakistan.
No, phenomenal. And you did a bit of commentary too after your playing days, didn't you?
Yeah. I worked with John Arlott and Brian Johnson and some other people, and it was a great experience, but it was marvellous.
Couldn't be like work, really, could it? I mean,
it couldn't work, or it's not light work.
It wasn't light work. I mean, it was like a day out, wasn't it?
Of course it was. Yes, of course it was. It was very good. I enjoyed every minute, and it was funny having somebody talking to me in your ear, and he gives you an instruction while you are talking. Oh yes, and as soon as you hear your name, as well, you're a professional now, much better than me. But as soon as you hear your name, you start to stop talking, and you've got to learn how to.
Yeah. Now, the other great skill that you've got, Pat Pocock, is you get up on stage. There's a bit of Welsh in you, isn't there?
Oh yes.
And you like to sing.
Oh yes, I do. I'm emptying some bigger places now.
Are you still doing the singing?
No, hardly ever.
This was an Albert Hall charity event, and you got up and stole the show.
Well, I did 4 songs, the Sinatra numbers and the Presley ballads and that sort of thing. But it was. I can remember when you have, as you well know, when you have a theatre and you have a blackout and somebody talks, it's called a voice from God. And there was a blackout with 2 pin spots into the middle of the stage, and a voice from God says, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former Surrey and England Test cricketer." And you can hear him thinking, "What on earth's he doing up there?" Oh dear, yeah.
Pat Pocock, you're a man that enjoys life. You hold a world record that may never be beaten, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
For joining me.
Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your trip to Lord's.
I'm looking forward to it very much indeed. Thank you. OK, it's time for Talking Pints. No, it's not. We've done that. It's time for Barrage the Farage. Right, Alex says, who is your all-time favourite politician? Oh, Alex, this question, it's a blooming nightmare, because whatever you say, you'll be condemned and criticised for. All-time is a difficult question to answer. In my lifetime, you know what? Whether you agreed with her or disagreed with her, whether you thought she was too harsh at times, at least Mrs. Thatcher believed in what you said. You could see it in her eyes. And I like leaders and politicians that have conviction, rather than those who've come straight from Oxford University and see it as a career path. Let's take the next one. Daryl asks, how can our government find £7 million a day to house illegal migrants, but can't afford a few quid to repair that annoying blinking light behind you on the Palace of Westminster? Well, look, I can't do much about that. I'm really sorry, but there you are. I do love your questions. Thank you, everybody. That's been great. I've had a really, really interesting, enjoyable, but also pretty thought-provoking evening. I have to say, when you think about Ukraine, it's big stuff. Back with you tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Be safe. Right now, it's the weather.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. It's been quite a mild start to the week, but it's all change as we go into Wednesday, as colder air makes its way in from the northwest. This is all due to a low pressure system just to the south of Iceland that's bringing a cold front southeastwards across the UK throughout tonight and into Wednesday morning. So this will be a band of cloud with some rain in it as well, quite heavy across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England for a time tonight. Ahead of that, they'll be mostly dry, though quite cloudy, so temperatures here will still be remaining mild for one last night really, though behind that, clearing skies will allow temperatures to drop, so we could just see a touch of grass frost here to start Wednesday. That cold front will make its way sporadically southeastwards through Wednesday, bringing quite patchy rain throughout the day and cloudy skies, particularly across East Anglia and southeast England for much of the day. Behind this, though, skies will clear, allowing for plenty of sunshine, but also some scattered showers that could be wintry over high ground. Now, as we go into Wednesday evening, that rain will start to clear away from the southeast, though it may linger for a time, and it will still be quite cloudy here as well overnight. Though behind that, skies will clear once again as we go into Thursday, so another patchy frost around, particularly across Wales, Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we could see some icy stretches on roads and pavements, particularly for Scotland and Northern England. As we go into the start of Thursday, it will be another cloudy start across the far southeast with some rain still lingering. But for elsewhere, there'll be plenty of sunshine to start the day, though rain will start to make its way in across northern Scotland, bringing some strong winds too. So it's quite an unsettled start to the outlook, but becoming increasingly dry by the weekend, with temperatures around average.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.